Hi guys, Tela Mathias here. I'm one of the managing partners at PhoenixTeam, and we are kicking off our first in our accessible AI series, where we are going to explore the ways that AI and generative AI can help us cut time to value by reducing the time it takes to deliver high quality software. And with me is my very good friend and colleague, Brian Woodring.
Hey, I'm Brian Woodring. I'm a career engineer, and I'm excited to talk to Tela and y'all about technology and how AI can change it.
Agreed. And I know that we've been doing on PhoenixTeam, we've done a lot of posts and articles recently as we've just started our AI journey. And I know that you've got a lot of experience taking large scale organizations on their AI journey. You tell us a little bit about, about yourself and about, what makes you think that you are qualified to talk about software development.
Well, it's a bold assumption right there, but assuming that I am, 28 years as a software engineer, the last decade or so as a technology leader and executive, most recently CTO at Rocket. And I think maybe my biggest single qualification is that I've probably screwed up software delivery just about every way you can. And so for the ones I haven't, I know you have. So we have a lot of qualifications in knowing what not to do and what needs to be better.
I'd say we have a lot in common, Brian, because as much good software as I've successfully released, there has been a lot of software that wasn't so successful. So, maybe to establish our qualifications, we can talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done that have really not gone well. I can start off with a very vivid memory. Long ago, supporting a very large enterprise mortgage servicer with a REO conversion. And that was the first time I really, really screwed up a conversion. Now, I've done a lot of good conversions. I don't want anyone out there to think that I'm not qualified to do conversions. I am. But I can tell you conversions are the big ugly. You got to write a lot of code. You got to move a lot of data. You got to test a lot of data. It's very difficult. So I can recall being summoned to various bridge lines, having to explain to two of my most favorite clients ever how bad it was and what we were going to do to fix it. And then I was on the line with them continuously for hours until it was resolved, but we did resolve it. So that was one of the first really spectacular ones, maybe 15 years ago at this point. How about you, Brian?
Yeah, I was thinking about it when you brought this up. And I think people usually think about software failure as sort of that giant fireball of spectacular failure. But the reality is most of the way things fail is that you miss your opportunity, right? I think about all of the various things, an API that had it been done 2 years earlier would have dominated an industry, but it shipped too little too late. A product that just missed the window or didn't deliver the value. There's a lot of very quiet ways that technology can fail. It can cost too much money, it can take too much time, and most importantly, it can miss the market. And I've hit the market a few times, and I've definitely missed the market a few times. And what it really reinforced to me is just how important speed is, right? Value exists in time, and you either are there when it's there or you're not.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but for me, having designed, imagined, delivered, implemented, and cared for technology for basically the entire 25 years of my professional career, it it it's really hard, and it takes too long, and it costs too much money, pretty much every time. And I think with mass availability at a relatively low cost of AI and generative AI hitting the space, I think that there's a huge opening here to make better software faster. What do you think about that?
Yeah, for sure. In fact, I would say of all the things that excite me over the last 18 months, and I've been hip deep in generative AI since early 2023, late 2022. And I think there's a lot of really exciting things about it. There's whole classes of problems that really can't easily be solved with traditional ML or deterministic code. But the thing that's maybe the most interesting and different than anything else we've seen is just how easy it is to quickly build things on. so much of the work comes from those immense foundational models that actually applying it to solve a problem can be shockingly easy. Like the kind of easy where you don't entirely trust it at first. You're like, well, that was too easy. Like, no, nobody built a valuable service in a 48-hour hackathon, except they did.
Except they
And
did.
that's the kind of thing that really gets me going. One of my core values is that technology is for everyone. It is not just for engineers. It is not just for computer scientists. And so that ability to allow anybody to deliver value more quickly than they ever have been before, that's really incredibly exciting.
I have to say that we have a team, a fully dedicated AI team, generative AI team on staff here at PhoenixTeam. And once we figured out what we didn't know and came to know it, we developed, what you would probably call a ragbot. We pushed out a custom GPT using OpenAI services and a broker API that we created using the ChatGPT experience. And I think by the time we knew what we were doing, we pushed it out in 2 days. And honestly, it is in use today at our company, solving a range of problems. Now it's not our end state, but we had to start somewhere. And it's my belief that with this new technology, the way we make software is going to fundamentally change. I think the jobs are going to change. I think with this type of capability, available at such a wide scale, I think we're going to see a whole new profession emerge, which I've been calling the value engineer. And that's a person that is a hybrid role. Your product manager, your product owner, your tester, your software engineer. It's a mix of everything that takes this curated content in a human on the loop type of a strategy and can much more rapidly develop those core artifacts of software development. What do you think?
Yeah, so I love that idea. And everybody's got their journey they go through, right? So there's the magic moment you have where you're trying it out and maybe you're a skeptic going in. I think almost everyone is. Then you try it and you're like, wow, that was kind of amazing. And then you go through like the curve of like your kind of irrational exuberance, then maybe a little skeptical rollback. And then you're like, nope, this is actually really incredibly useful. And yeah, so I do think there's a role maybe for someone who might have historically been a business analyst or a product owner or a system administrator, right? Someone who is in the technology space who can still think in terms of systems design, because I don't think the need for that changes at all.
No,
That's
I
one of the
agree.
things I've been emphasizing. Like, even if less code has to be written, that doesn't change the need for engineers and analysts and people who know how to think. But I do think it can allow them to deliver, like, for example, building a prototype. That's a great example. I want to build a prototype, something kind of that works, but maybe it isn't fully functional. Historically, I've had to pair up with an engineer, and they're all busy because they're building and supporting production software. Now I can actually get something out to put in front of a user this week myself without waiting on an engineer's time to become available. That's the kind of thing I think there's huge opportunity.
And that it's funny you mentioned that because that was an experiment that we ran. We had 4 use cases that we were trying to solve. We wanted, of course, to be able to generate user stories, generate acceptance criteria, generate learning so that we could rapidly come up to speed on new business domains. And then we wanted to create storyboards. Storyboards, as anybody knows, very, very time consuming. If you even have an Illustrator skill set, they can take certainly days, oftentimes weeks to make. And anybody that's done anything with Dolly, which is the image generator component of the OpenAI suite of APIs, knows that you get a lot of weird results. And so what we figured out how to do was provide just the right set of instructions to stabilize the images and to really be able to take that down to minutes in terms of generating really high quality, compelling stories in the blink of an eye. Now, this tech is moving so fast. I bet you that the next version of OpenAI comes out and they probably already got that solved, So that's kind of part of the challenge is how do we keep up? And what's your perspective as a career technologist and AI enthusiast? What's your perspective on how fast this tech is moving?
Yeah, I mean, we at Rocket, right? We released several different versions of the tech every time a new model came out. GPT-3, then 4. then Claude, then Gemini. As they would come out, we'd experiment with different ones. We found different models would have different strengths and weaknesses. I also think you're going to see a huge cottage industry of companies now creating value-adding products on top of the foundational models. Not many companies can afford to build the foundational models, the computational resources, the storage, the data. It's a billion-dollar problem, right? It's like building chip fabrication. Only a few companies in the world can do it. But there's going to be an entire industry of companies who build that next level up the stack of tooling. So maybe a specific storyboard generator. That could be a product right there, right? There's huge amounts of work that go into it. And look, we know the state of the industry that we have both spent our entire careers in. You don't, it's not hard. You can go into the backlog for any product and see half-written user stories, never from PhoenixTeam people, I'm sure. But you can see half-written user stories, storyboards that are outdated, client journeys that don't make any sense. The quality of work on average, and I don't think it's for lack of care, I think it's for lack of time.
Yeah.
It's too expensive to build really high quality, what I think of as the inputs to software delivery, right? If you're an engineer, these are your inputs into the process where you're going to actually build software, test, and ship it. High quality inputs are incredibly valuable, but they're so expensive and time consuming to build. And they're almost always the first thing that gets dropped or compromised when time is tight, and time is always tight. So the ability to make those things with quality much faster, it's a huge potential force multiplier.
Totally agree. And before we wrap up, I think next time it would be great to talk in what we've started thinking of as the imagine space. So we are imagining at PhoenixTeam a future of software development where it is completely supported, augmented with highly curated, machine curated quality inputs and outputs for software development. And we think of it in terms of 4 buckets. The imagine space, which I think is potentially, and I think that the media is playing this out as well, the imagine space, that creative space, that imagining what we should do, that imagine place is, I think, where we're not seeing a lot of penetration in providers. I think it's a really hard space. So we think about, what does it take us to imagine the right thing to build? Then we think about analysis. That's your very traditional business analysis. I think that's going to change in the future, but you've got your analyze. I got to get my user stories. I got to get my test cases. I got to get my acceptance criteria. Then we think of design, not only design of the user experience, but also the design of the technical infrastructure, the solution architecture, and then solve. And the solve space is really the push button, get software. I think we're seeing a lot of penetration in that space. But where, I think it'll be a very interesting challenge to see putting all those pieces and parts together. And, how can we get to, as you had mentioned, how can I get through ideas in a matter of minutes instead of days, weeks, months, or even years? So any closing thoughts on that topic?
No, I mean, I think that is the real problem to solve. And I can't wait to talk to you about it.
Yeah, so I think for everybody watching out there, this is Brian Woodring. Thank you so much for joining us. Introducing our next segment in our Accessible AI series. We're going to talk about how we can use AI and generative AI in the imagine space of software development. So this has been great. Thanks to all of you that are watching. I'm Tela Mathias, one of the managing partners at PhoenixTeam. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.